Hey everybody, thanks again for joining another House of Bricks Live. I'm coming fresh out of Labor Day weekend, did some grilling at the pool. Really excited about wrapping up Q3 strong here. We've had some amazing guests here on the House of Bricks Lives, and you've noticed we've made our shift into featuring more and more veterans. They serve our country. They've had a lot of sacrifice, collateral damage, things that a lot of people don't see and don't hear about or only think about on Veterans Day and specific days of the year. We're trying to change that here at the House of Bricks because it's just a great opportunity for us to leverage our ecosystem of entrepreneurs, business coaching, advisory, investors to really create a platform for people to hear these stories. Life is all about the story you tell and the way you live your life and how you can impact other people. And it's just been really my honor to feature some of these guests. And there's just going to be more and more to come. If you're just joining us for the first time, you can find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, all those things you can subscribe to. But if you can't find me, you're probably lost anyway. We're trying to be everywhere all the time just to get the word out about the House of Bricks and our mission for veterans. I'm sure you've seen our What the Truck initiative. More to come on that as well, just raising awareness for mental health and suicide prevention in the veteran world. And then also helping every veteran with the opportunity to get a VA mortgage. If you have one, maybe there's a lower interest rate out there, but we've got a partnership with Centra Mortgage. So a lot going on there, but enough about where we've been. Let's jump into today's show. So John Dragon Teichert is today's guest, and he's a retired general who's led leadership at the highest levels of service after graduating from MIT and Stanford. I dropped out of college after my freshman year, so I can tell I'm already going to learn a lot on this show. So John entered the U.S. Air Force as an F-15 combat pilot, later becoming an F-22 test pilot and commanding both Edwards Air Force Base and Joint Base Andrews. He's also served as our nation's senior defense official in Iraq and finished his career as the Assistant Deputy Under Secretary of the Air Force for International Affairs. So with over 2,000 flight hours across 38 aircrafts and decades of leadership experience, John now leads Capital Leadership LLC, helping organizations break barriers, challenge convention, and ignite innovation. He's also an Amazon #1 best-selling author and a thought leader on national security, technology, and the art of leading well. John, it's our honor to have you with us today on the House of Bricks.
Adam, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for focusing on how to increase some visibility on veteran issues across the spectrum. We appreciate you, I appreciate you, and I'm looking forward to today.
Well, you made me feel like an underachiever after reading your bio. I was like, what hasn't this guy done yet? But we know that, those are the highlights that we go through in life. People look back at all the things you've accomplished. But what's really been your driving force and motivation to continue accomplishing new things?
Adam, when I was a 17-year-old there at MIT starting ROTC in college, I first took my oath of office to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I happened to do so alongside of a really attractive other ROTC cadet that now has been my wife for 27 years. But really, it has been that mission statement that drove me to serve for 28 years in the military. But to some extent, in this last 2.5 years since I retired, it's the driving factor in how can I help develop the leaders our nation needs and break barriers, challenge convention, and ignite innovation.
No, I love that. And listen, again, reading your bio, so much we could talk about here, but in the short time we have, I know you've led through some of the most intense and high-stake environments imaginable. Take us back into March of 2009 when you were stepping into command after the tragic loss of Dave Cooley.
Adam, absolutely. And it was on that date, the 25th of March, 2009. We're in the middle of an F-22 test mission. Cools, as we call him, lost his life in the midst of a crash during a specific test point. It was heart-wrenching. It was brutal for all of us. It was a 700-person organization that was healing at the same time. We needed to get back into the game of flight tests for the F-22. But specifically related to this show, Adam, I love the idea that I think the origin of your show is the idea that you need to build your house upon the rock instead of your house upon the sand. I think that comes from Matthew chapter 7. And it's a great reminder that when the rains descend and the floods come and the winds blow, you really know how good of a foundation you have. And so on that day, on the 25th of March, 2009, it was a chance for us, I even hazard to say an opportunity in the midst of the heartache, to demonstrate that we had been doing some things all along to create a solid foundation. And it actually rewinds about 5 years from that, when I was a captain test pilot, Adam, in the F-22. And my director of operation, Lieutenant Colonel Dawn Dunlop, came in during an aircrew meeting. And instead of talking about the normal things that she would talk about, she said, today we're just going to simulate that we had a crash. And she assigned some rules and passed out some regulations and said, go. And it was an hour of gut-wrenching discussion, tabletop style, about what would we do and how would we respond if we had a crash. We didn't have a crash during her tenure, but I was in her position in December of 2008, and I did that exact same thing, Adam. And then 3 months later, when we had that crash, that we were far better practically and emotionally prepared for the accident, for the crisis, because we had prepared for it. We had created a strong foundation for it. And I think it's an important leadership concept, Adam, that people aren't going to remember you as a leader from the nominal times. It's easy to be a leader when the times are good, but you really know if you built the right foundations when the rains descend and the floods come and the winds blow. And the amount of time that we took during an aircrew meeting under Dawn Dunlop and then a few years later under me gave us the chance to prepare so that we could turn what was absolutely a crisis into something that I would guarantee, if you ask any one of those 700 people in that organization at the time what they thought about the organization, they'd remember that day and they would remember that we collectively did it right. That's what it means to build a house of bricks. And I think that day was a great example, in spite of the horrible loss of Cools, of how you do that right at 1G and 0 knots. So when the floods come, you're ready to go.
So much there, and I love the faith tie-in. As I've been building the House of Bricks, we've been focused on teaching people how to turn obstacles into stepping stones. And, I have some, devotion time kind of in my regular schedule. And you feel at times in life like, man, I've lost myself. But in reality, what you've lost is all the things that you were holding on to that shouldn't have been part of your foundation anyway. So you really see kind of what you're building upon, like you said, the rock versus the sand, or building brick by brick. So first of all, thank you for sharing, that story. And as we talked about kind of in the introduction, people will go on and look at my LinkedIn resume and they're like, oh my gosh, you started 7 companies, took a company public. And I said, yeah. And the other 99% of the time, I've been getting crushed for the last 30 years. So it's never what it appears. But we have this methodology we talk about: test, fail, learn, grow, flywheel. You're continuing to take action. That action gives you feedback. That feedback creates the data where you can make better decisions going forward. So it's just getting you out of the block and getting that action and information. So with your story, one of the things I appreciate most about leaders like you is the willingness to be real about the messy moments, not just the polished wins, but you've led in combat, you've commanded massive organizations and sat on live TV breaking down complex conflicts for millions of viewers. But sometimes the most powerful lessons in life, they're going to come from those unexpected places, like that feedback that really stings you. So you've shared a story about receiving an email during a stretch of back-to-back news appearances where a viewer opened with the line, "I didn't think you were very bright." Can you walk us through that moment and how it became test, fail, learn, and grow for your story? And what would we do without critics around us, right? Those are the emails we need. So.
No, they are the emails we need. And you are spot on that while you put on your LinkedIn or your resume the glamorous outcome, likely it was a lot of messiness to get there. And if you're not learning and growing from the messiness, then you're never going to get to the clean, nice, pretty LinkedIn profile that looks like you're somebody, when reality, It was just because you learned from a whole lot of mistakes and challenges and turn those challenges into opportunities that you've gotten to where you are. And yeah, so let me share a little bit of a story. I do a lot of national security and international affairs commentary on news, primarily Fox News and News Nation. And there was that period of the 12-day war back in June between Iran and Israel. And I ended up doing, I think, 39 TV hits during those 2 weeks. It was very busy. But on my website, johnteichert.com, there's a place where you can type in a request to book me for keynote speaking. But it's really an end around to write whatever you want, and it comes directly to me. So I guess some people have figured that out. By the way, that's okay. And I remember after one of those hits, I can't remember where it was, I've got it in front of me, this lady named Gina wrote this: "I'm seeing you a lot on Fox, so I decided to visit your website. You're quite accomplished. I was surprised because honestly, I didn't think you were very bright. I see now that my impression was wrong. In my experience, only ignorant people mispronounce nuclear." And it was really me saying nuclear, I guess, sometimes instead of nuclear. There's a difference there. And I wrote back and said, "Gina, I appreciate that. I'm sure I was wrong. I'll work on it." And then it started to get into my head a little bit, Adam, of, all right, I've got some hits coming up and I don't want to jack it up. I want to do a good job. And Gina was right. And so I started singing a little nuclear song around the house so that I would get the rep so I wouldn't mess it up. But the next one was on Jesse Waters on Fox Primetime. And I'm like, all right, don't want it to get in my head, but I want to say it right. So I did my best. And then Gina, who now knows how to get a hold of me, said this: "I saw you on Jesse tonight. And when you said nuclear, I actually stood up and gave you a fist pump. You reverted back on the second one, but that's okay. I know you've got this." So now she's giving me this real-time feedback like she's my coach. We corresponded, Adam, a little bit back and forth after that. And then the last email I got from her said this: "I can't believe that you took the time to respond to me in such a kind and respectful way. You now have fans for life, my spouse and I, and a couple of my friends whom I told about our interaction. If you ever run for office, and I believe you will if you aspire to, please call on me to volunteer on your campaign. I'll do whatever you need, as I believe you're an exemplary human being." It's amazing. I went from stupid to exemplary in about 2 cycles of emails. But I think there's a couple of important points here about learning from the challenges or the shortcomings, Adam. And that is, number one, that you're not doing everything right as a person or a leader. And if you don't incorporate feedback to get better, then you're going to miss opportunities. And then the second point is that if you properly respond to feedback, then you're going to turn detractors into collaborators and fans. And then it creates this virtuous cycle where you now get more feedback that you need to hear because you're not doing everything right. And more people are willing to jump on board your team because you've got the humility to absorb the feedback that they provide. And I just think that's a great example of what you're talking about in your cycle, Adam, where if we listen to feedback and consider how we can be doing things better, then we can get better and better every day, and we can bring people along with us.
It's a way to separate yourself in life, right? Because most people don't even take that first step. So if you just test and take some action, you're ahead of about 70% of the people. And I'm just going to make up some percentages. I don't really know. But then people will fail, and they only want to fail once. They didn't like how it felt. They didn't learn anything. They just went back to, before where they started. If you can learn from failure, that's great. And then that's where the real growth happens, which, it sounds like you had some. And I was laughing when you were saying that about nuclear. Now I don't even know how to say it. But Paul will get on before the episode. He's like, all right, the guy's last name is this. And I'm like, this? And I was, no, not that. And then boom, first thing, hit it with the wrong last name. So I empathize with you. But people that don't do this for a living, they don't understand, what we go through. So what was the growth opportunity? You may have talked a little bit about it, but, the testing, failing, learning, you were kind of alluding to it. But what's one key takeaway of how people can grow?
Adam, I talk about in one of my books, it's called Boom, is the title of the book. It's an innovation leadership book about a cycle that I call listen, consider, and act, which is in order to create an innovative, growth-minded organization, then everyone in the organization, whether it's 11 people or 11,000 like the base that I commanded at Edwards, if everyone in the organization believes that if they have an idea that someone in charge is willing to listen and consider it and then act appropriately, then now you're unlocking the talent that is all around you and you're unleashing your team. And it's that cycle that you and I have now been talking about for a little while. And, you know, I got to fly over the course of my career almost continuously, F-15s, F-22s, some other things as well. But I think the thing that makes us superior in aviation to any other country is not that we have the fanciest technology or the best pilots. It's that after every single mission I have ever flown, test, training, or combat, you sit down, you reflect upon what were the objectives that you stated before the mission, how did you do, and if there are any errors, you go back to where is the root cause of that error. And sometimes those debriefs, Adam, take as long as the flight, or sometimes 2 times, 3 times, or 4 times as long as the flight. And it's interesting, if you look back in history, the last time an American military member was killed on the ground by a manned adversary from the air was April of 1953. We have been dominant for 82 years, not because of the best technology or the best pilots, but because after every mission, we use that cycle to make sure we're getting better by the end than we were in the beginning. And we reflect upon what were the objectives, where did we fall short, and what are the root causes that we need to work on to get better. If we do that in our lives, as a worker, as a leader, as a communications professional, as a media guru, if you do it anywhere and you have a cycle in your life where you're absorbing feedback, you're listening, considering, and acting, and you're being deliberate about mapping performance to objectives and finding root causes where you fall short, then now you are growing every single day. And all of that messiness can ultimately lead to something that is clean and good.
Man, that was very well said. I know we've kind of joked around a little bit. We kind of mix everything in here. And I also wanted to thank you for your service. I didn't say that at the beginning of the show. And you've written about responding to your best friend's suicide. Would you share how that experience shaped your view on leadership, service, and resilience?
Adam, absolutely. And this was back in 2019. And of course, it's heartbreaking. And it certainly still is heartbreaking to some extent, much like the death of Cooley back in 2009. And I had an opportunity shortly after that to stand up on what we call the Resilience Day on my base at Edwards Air Force Base and share some very raw, genuine, transparent thoughts about that situation. And one of the things that the Air Force, and I think it's the whole military, does pretty well is talk about the pillars of resilience. And I think the pillars are mental, social, spiritual, and physical. Those are individual pillars that you need to cultivate in the good times, the bricks you need to build up in the good times, so that when the bad times happen, you've got the strength or the resilience to endure. And I think that's pretty good. But I think in what I shared on that day in front of the group there, Adam, is that we need to do some things as a society or as a community or as a neighborhood or a sports team or a church or a workplace or a school so that we're building up communal networked resiliency. And what I mean by that is that the people that are around us are going through some things. Sometimes we should be sharing in their successes, or sometimes we should be uplifting them when they go through turmoil. And the problem, I think, Adam, in society today is people sit in their homes or they sit in their bedrooms or their dorm rooms and they try to battle tough things on their own. I think that's what my buddy did, instead of reaching out and having a community that notices that someone isn't quite doing well and bring them into the community so that while their well of resilience might be running dry, we are lifting them up. And what I challenged my base there to do at that time, because suicide is a problem in the military just like it is in society, is to be a network where you are creating resilience, not just encouraging individuals to be resilient, but finding ways to build a community of resilience so that when someone is struggling, we have the resilience to lift them up. When their pillars have broken down, we have strong pillars that they can affix themselves to. And I talked to the team about that, and it was brutal. Actually, one of the things that I mentioned came from a place called Newberg, Oregon, which was actually close to where my good friend committed suicide. And it was a young lady who saw a lot of suicide deaths there in Newberg and started to create signs that go in people's yards that say things like, "You're loved, you matter, don't give up." You might have seen those around your community. I've actually got someone down the road that displays those signs. But her idea was that if we do that, not just with signs, but then put it into action, then you're creating communities of resilience that can help solve a problem that is a pandemic for our society, which is suicide.
Yeah. And, man, again, every time you talk, I have like 4 things I want to elaborate on. Very well put together. I was thinking about even the reason I started the House of Bricks community, because I compare entrepreneurship to being a soldier. There is a battlefield. 9 out of 10 startups fail. It's very lonely at the top. You're isolated. You have to have all the answers for your team. You don't have the money to pay them. Like all of those things you go through, and then the collateral damage, right, to relationships, those around you, because of the sacrifice that you're putting into your business. But we really are making that shift to the House of Bricks, or within the House of Bricks community, to be that unit, be that tribe for veterans. Because when you enter civilian life, you've come out of a place where you're being told what to do every single day, right? Be here, be there. And then there's your structure, there's your unit. And then you come out, and it's that first moment where you're the most dangerous to yourself or the people around you, because you don't have a unit with you. So I'll just say it, it's a male thing as well. We don't like to ask for help, but one of the veterans that's actually driving the Raptor for the truck, he said something when he was up here, which was, veterans don't want to hand out, they want to hand up. And so we just want to be that stepping stone, the stairs of bricks, so to speak, where it's a place to connect with investors, learn about business. And veterans are oftentimes, more than not, more qualified than the people sitting behind the desk. They just need that opportunity and how to take those skills and transition really from the battlefield to the boardroom. So when you talk about lethal weapon leadership, what does that mean, and why is that so vital today?
Adam, going back a little bit to what you just said, I think one of the reasons that veterans struggle is one of the reasons why people are struggling all over society. And it's, people are looking for 2 different things in life. I'm firmly a believer that there are 2 things that human beings are looking for. They're looking to be loved or cared for, and they're looking to be part of something that is greater than themselves. And I think one of the reasons veterans struggle in particular is because they came from this unit where they knew that they cared for their buddies to the left and to the right of them, and they were cared for similarly. And then they get out into the world and they may not have it. And then they were part of something that was a higher purpose greater than themselves. And now they're apart from that. But by the way, it's not just a military thing. Whether you're a business owner, whether you're a worker, it doesn't matter where you are. It's an important leadership lesson to realize that you as a leader should create an environment in your workplace or in your culture where you're genuinely caring for people or loving them, and you're helping tie them into a higher purpose that's greater than themselves. The lethal weapon leadership idea is actually an idea that I'm writing about a little bit, and something that I'll publish pretty soon, I think, on my monthly newsletter, which is about how when you are a leader and you come to the conclusion that it's not about you, but it's about the team, the organization, and the purpose, then now by setting yourself aside, you can actually get a lot more done and be far more productive and successful than if you're always worried about the person that's staring back with you or at you in the mirror. And I call it lethal weapon leadership because it is a riff off of that old time movie with Mel Gibson and Danny Glover. And I think Mel Gibson, I think his name was Detective, was it Riggs or Tubbs? He was one of those guys, and Danny Glover was the other one. But if you remember the theme of that movie, it was that he had a little bit lost his will to live, or he didn't care about his own safety. And so he was a little bit of a reckless but aggressive detective. And he actually got a lot done and ended up being healthy and safe along the way because he set himself aside. And I think if we have a little bit far more in our society of leaders who set themselves aside and are willing to be a little bit reckless and aggressive and don't care about them, but care about the mission and the people, then now they're going to get a lot more done than the people that are in a defensive crouch just worried about their own well-being or their own safety. So that's why I call it lethal weapon leadership. And maybe I should go back and rewatch the movie so I get those names right. But either way, the idea that as a leader, and I've seen it in my own life at times, when I believe that I'm terminal and my career is over, and I just lead in the ways that I know that I should, then I find out that I'm far more effective than if I'm the type of leader that's always worried about the next promotion or the next opportunity.
Yeah, I was thinking, I believe in that movie, he always was dislocating his shoulder or something, right?
That's all he would slam it against the wall to pop it back into place. Yeah,
I remember that vividly. And when you said an old movie, I don't know if you remember, I knew exactly what it was. So I guess we're that old that it resonated for us. So last question here, and then just want to hear a little bit more about kind of your current focus. There's a lot of organizations out there that get stuck in the frozen middle. How do leaders break through that to really unleash innovation?
Adam, great question. And for those that don't know that term frozen middle, it's essentially the long-term people that have been a part of an organization kind of in the middle of the structure that are resistant to change. So while there may be a leader that wants to change, or the young people in the organization want to change, they're the ones that kind of gum up the works. I guess it's the same as the swamp in Washington, D.C., which is where I live, a little bit of the swamp. But I think there's 5 things that you can do as a leader to break through the frozen middle. The first one is that you need to provide an aspirational statement, that you need to be motivational in this bold vision that you cast for the organization so that people know that you're trying to go somewhere good and you're trying to go somewhere that is big. And I think if you start with that, then you'll get a lot of the people on board. The flip side of that same coin is point number 2, Adam, which is describing a looming crisis, which is describing to your team, if it's true that the reason you want to go somewhere good is because if you stay where you are, then something bad is going to happen. You're going to get overtaken. You're going to go out of business. The adversary is going to defeat you. And so you describe as compelling of a way as you can the aspirational idea and then the looming crisis. But neither of those are going to work unless you relentlessly socialize them, unless you're constantly talking about, here's what I'm trying to get to and why. And a quick story, I hope we have time, but when my middle daughter was 5, I was accepting the command of a big 700-person organization that does flight test. And I got done with my speech and I went out to lunch with my family. And I always weave in my aspirational statement during my change of command speech. And I asked my wife, hey, how'd my speech go? And she was very nice and said, great. And my other 2 kids, they said, Dad, it was awesome. Tiffany, my middle daughter, who was 5, said, Dad, it was boring. And I said, Tiffany, what are you talking about? It was a great speech. She said, Dad, all you said is, blah, 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 for the warfighter, blah, 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 for the warfighter, blah, 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 for the warfighter. For the warfighter was my aspirational statement, my idea for the organization, focusing everything we did on the warfighter. And here's why I was proud of that, Adam, because little Tiffany, that doesn't pay attention to anything, knew what the main point of my speech was. She remembered it. The only way that we can help people understand our aspirational statement and the looming crisis is to say it so much that you're sick of it and over-communicate again and again and again. So it's blah, blah, blah for the warfighter, blah, blah, blah for the warfighter, blah, blah, blah for the warfighter. Number 4 quickly is the squeeze play, where if you get your leadership team on board with what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, and you then excite the new young members of the organization, then now you're squeezing out the frozen middle so they have nowhere else to go. They get pressure from the bottom, which is actually where change bubbles up from. It is protected from the top, but they get squeezed in between. And then the last one is this, Adam. And I think it goes back to something that Margaret Thatcher said about Ronald Reagan. She said he only ever had 2 or 3 ideas, but they were big and they were good, and he went after them relentlessly. And the idea that if we are very good about aligning our incentives in our organization with the things that we know really matters, then now you're going to co-opt people and get people on board. And that means you're going to promote people that further that aspirational statement. You're going to award them for furthering that aspirational statement. They're going to get FaceTime with the boss when they're furthering that aspirational statement. You're going to resource the projects that further that aspirational statement. And at that point, they have nowhere else to go. That they're not going to move up. They're not going to get paid attention to. They're not going to get promoted. They're not going to get funded if they don't jump on board with what you're trying to do. And so I think if you use those 5 steps, Adam, the now aspirational statement, looming crisis, relentless socialization, squeeze play, and then aligning incentives, then you can break through a frozen middle, even in the swamp in Washington, D.C., by moving your organization forward in those 5 ways.
Well, I love that. And that is a great place for us to wrap up today. First of all, I want to thank you for joining a little podcast like us. We're just trying to make a big impact, but it's just the beginning. We're building brick by brick. And again, featuring great people like you, veterans, raise that awareness, bring that honor, respect, loyalty. My grandfather, he was in World War II, huge impact in my life. That's where this passion comes from. I didn't serve, but it was that impact he made. And if we can connect veterans with entrepreneurs and create that ecosystem, I really think we can create a great movement here. So I know you mentioned a newsletter earlier that people can subscribe to, and also your website if they want to send you an email directly with feedback of words that you may have mispronounced today. So you never know who's listening to the House of Bricks. You may get a couple emails, but tell us where people can find out more about you and about the newsletter, and we'll wrap up.
Awesome. Adam, thanks for that. Teichert, all one word.com is my website. From there, you can go to my YouTube. From there, you can go to my LinkedIn. From there, you can sign up for my regular free high-value newsletter. I've written 3 books. Boom, I described. I have a 90-day Christian devotional entitled Prayers for a Nation. And I just published a kid's book entitled The Dragon Who Earned His Wings. I'm actually just starting to write a book, In God I Trust, which is about the dependency of our nation from its foundation for the 250th anniversary of our country. All of it you can see on my website. And I would love it if people would give me feedback about all the things I said and did wrong on our show today, Adam, or reach out to me if there's ever anything that I can do for anyone who's listened in for this today.
Hey, John, thanks again for joining. I mean, really your story from the cockpit to command and now developing this next generation of leaders. I'll reemphasize it. I love the faith-based initiative, going back to the best seller of all time, the true brick that we can all build our foundation on. So, it's leadership at every level comes down to what you call the listen, consider, act cycle. And that's something every founder, executive, veteran, I know they can benefit from. So I want to thank everyone for joining today. If you're not a part of the House of Bricks community, you can find us on LinkedIn. Check out our newsletter. We're featuring best-in-class people. And when we say that, it's not the ones with the best resume, but they have just great advice, great life experience. And we really learn from others and their story and how we can build the best version of ourselves. So thanks again, John, for being on the House of Bricks Live, and we'll see everybody soon.